Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're going to tackle this whole idea of turning obstacles upside down.
Okay.
I've got these excerpts you sent over from The Obstacle is the Way,
Right.
along with some classic Stoic writings.
Okay. Yeah.
And I got to say, I'm already pretty fascinated by this, like this
Mm.
idea that challenges can actually be beneficial.
Yeah. It really is an interesting shift in thinking, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
we're so used to,
Right.
viewing obstacles as roadblocks, but what if they're actually more like, I don't know, weight training for the mind?
Oh, that's good. I
Yeah.
like that analogy. That's a good one.
Yeah.
And speaking of mental strength,
Mm-hmm.
one thing that really jumped out at me from all this material was
Yeah.
how much emphasis they put on perception.
Uh-huh.
Like, it's not the events themselves, but our interpretation of them that really
Yeah.
makes all the difference.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
and we see that play out in some pretty striking ways throughout history. If you think about it,
Okay.
like take John D. Rockefeller, for example.
Okay, yeah.
Back in 1857, during the panic,
Okay.
when the economy was, basically imploding,
Yeah.
most people were, understandably,
Right.
freaking out,
Of course, yeah.
but not Rockefeller.
Oh.
He saw the chaos as a chance to learn.
Wow.
He just dove in headfirst, studying the market, figuring out how it worked.
So instead of panicking, he was like taking notes.
Pretty much.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's some serious next level thinking.
Yeah.
But, think about what that means for us today.
Yeah.
What if instead of getting all swept up in the fear of, I don't know, a downturn, we kind of took a page from his book?
Right.
Imagine using that time to research industries,
Yeah.
identify, undervalued assets,
Yeah.
maybe even just, sharpen our financial literacy. It's
Right.
about turning that reactive fear
Well-
into proactive learning.
Okay, yeah, that makes total sense in like
Yeah.
a financial context.
Huh.
But what about when we're dealing with like
Yeah.
really heavy stuff, like a major injustice?
Mhm.
The book mentions Reuben Hurricane Carter,
Okay. Yeah.
the boxer, wrongly convicted of murder,
Right.
spent years behind bars
Yeah.
for the crime he didn't commit.
Wow.
I mean, that feels different
Yeah.
than, a market crash. Right?
Well, Carter's story is a really powerful example of
Yeah.
what the Stoics called the inner citadel.
Okay.
Even though he was physically imprisoned,
Right.
he refused to let his circumstances
Right.
imprison his mind.
Yeah.
He focused on what he could control,
Okay.
his thoughts, his reactions, his inner strength.
So even in that situation,
Mm-hmm.
that just seems utterly hopeless.
Yeah.
There's still a degree of
Yeah,
agency that we can exercise.
exactly.
Wow.
And that's where some of those practical Stoic techniques
yeah.
can really come in. One that might resonate here is negative visualization.
Okay.
I know it might sound a little counterintuitive,
Well,
but bear with me for a second.
Okay.
The Stoics would actually spend time
Yeah.
imagining the worst case scenarios in their lives.
Oh, wow.
Not to become pessimists or anything,
Right.
but to mentally prepare themselves
Right.
for the possibility of those events happening.
So it's like a
Yeah.
mental fire drill.
Exactly.
Like you're running through all the what ifs
Mm,
so that you're not completely blindsided if
right, exactly.
if things go
Like,
south.
you're not caught off guard.
Right.
It really helps to strip away the
Yeah.
fear and anxiety surrounding those potential events.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is by mentally rehearsing those situations,
Yeah.
we can often identify
Mm-hmm.
potential solutions
Okay.
or coping mechanisms
Wow.
in advance.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That reminds me of
Mhm.
something else from the book. The story about Ulysses S. Grant,
Uh-huh.
the Civil War general,
Yeah.
and how he stayed completely calm.
Oh, wow.
When a skylight shattered above him,
Oh, my gosh.
everyone else panicked,
Yeah.
but Grant didn't even flinch.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
That's amazing.
It really is a brilliant illustration
Yeah.
of the power of,
Mm-hmm.
training our minds
Yeah.
to handle pressure.
Right.
I think we often think of courage as this,
Yeah.
innate quality, but
Right.
the Stoics believed that it was a skill.
Really?
Yeah, that you could develop,
Right.
just like physical strength.
So instead of being ruled by
Mm-hmm.
our knee-jerk reactions,
Right.
we can actually train ourselves
Yeah.
to respond
Uh-huh.
more calmly and effectively.
Exactly. Think of it like this.
Okay.
Our emotions are like, I don't know, wild horses.
Okay.
If we try to just, control them by brute force,
Yeah.
we're going to get thrown off. But if we can learn to work with them, guide them,
Yeah.
we can actually harness their power
Mhm.
and use it to our advantage.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Stoics had all kinds of specific practices for this,
Huh.
like focusing on our breath, observing our emotions without judgment,
Right.
choosing our responses intentionally.
So we're starting to see how, like, perception
Mm-hmm.
and emotional control, play into
Yeah.
this idea of turning obstacles upside down.
Uh-huh.
But there's also this other concept that keeps popping up for me,
Okay.
and that's objectivity.
Yeah.
It's about seeing things as they really are,
Right.
without letting our emotions cloud our judgment.
This is where the Stoic idea of contemptuous expressions
Oh, okay.
really comes into play.
Okay.
It's about deliberately stripping away the mystique or the allure of things
Right.
that might, intimidate us or make us anxious.
So it's kind of like
Yeah.
seeing through the hype, getting down to, like, the bare bones of a
Our
situation.
bare bones, yeah.
Yeah.
The Stoics would even practice, like,
Mm-hmm.
visualizing powerful figures in mundane situations,
Right.
like, picturing an emperor on the toilet.
Okay.
Not to be disrespectful or anything,
Right.
but to remind themselves that even the most imposing figures
Right.
are just human beings.
They're just people.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay. Could you give me, like, a more concrete example
Sure.
of how I might use this,
Absolutely.
like,
And
in everyday life?
let's say you're feeling intimidated
Mm-hmm.
by a presentation you have to give
Okay. Yeah.
at
Yeah.
work, right?
Yeah.
Instead of getting all swept up in the anxiety,
Right.
try picturing your audience in their pajamas.
Okay.
Or imagine them, like, tripping over their words.
Okay.
I know it might sound silly,
Yeah.
but it can be surprisingly effective
Interesting.
in, shifting your perspective,
Yeah.
reducing the perceived threat.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you're taking away the power of those
Exactly.
intimidating thoughts
Uh-huh.
by exposing how absurd they are.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And speaking of shifting perspectives,
Yeah.
the samurai Miyamoto Musashi,
Mm-hmm.
in his text, The Book of Five Rings,
Okay.
talks about this difference between the perceiving eye
Okay.
and the observing eye.
And how does that tie into, like,
Yeah.
this idea of objectivity?
So the perceiving eye, he says,
Yeah.
is clouded by judgments, by biases, by expectations.
Okay.
It's like looking through a distorted lens.
Right. Oh.
The observing eye,
Yeah.
on the other hand, sees things clearly
Right.
without those mental filters.
So it's like the difference between reacting emotionally
Yes,
and responding rationally.
exactly.
Gotcha.
And the Stoics believed we could cultivate
Right.
that observing eye through practice.
Okay.
They would recommend techniques like, mentally stripping away the glamorous facade of things
Right.
to see their true nature. Okay.
Or focusing on the present moment without judgment.
This is all starting to feel like a superpower in the making.
It is pretty powerful stuff.
But how do we actually,
Yeah.
put these ideas into action?
Right.
It's one thing to understand them conceptually,
Uh-huh.
but how do we turn them into,
Yeah.
action?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what we'll delve into next.
Okay, awesome.
How do we take these powerful principles
Mm-hmm.
and translate them into, like, tangible steps?
Okay.
Into a way of moving through the world that is both effective and,
Right.
dare I say, joyful.
May like it. All right, I'm ready.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so we've laid some groundwork here, exploring these ideas about perception, emotional regulation,
Yeah.
and objectivity, all these things that can help us
Right.
reframe these obstacles.
Yeah.
But you're right.
Yeah.
It is time to kind of move beyond
Right.
just the theoretical
Right, exactly.
and get into the realm of action. Yeah, how do we actually
Yeah.
take these principles
Yeah.
and apply them in our lives?
Well, from what I'm gathering
Yeah.
from these sources, it seems like, a big part of it is about channeling
Okay.
that reframed perspective
Yeah.
into action.
Right.
But not just any action.
Right.
It's got to be action that's aligned with,
Okay.
with this new way of seeing things.
Right, so it's like targeted action.
Exactly. And one of the most inspiring examples,
Yeah.
I think, that really illustrates this
Yeah.
is Demosthenes, the Athenian orator.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Now, imagine
Mhm.
being born with a speech impediment
Okay.
in a culture where public speaking
Right.
was practically a national sport.
Yeah, that's rough.
Most people would have probably shrunk from the spotlight,
Right.
but not Demosthenes.
Okay.
He turned that obstacle
Yeah.
into his training ground.
So the book mentions
yeah.
that he practiced with pebbles in his mouth.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Yeah.
And recited speeches while running.
Oh, wow.
He even, trained his voice
Wow.
by the roaring sea
Ooh,
to
yeah.
overcome his shyness.
That's some serious dedication.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's not just about raw effort.
Right.
It's about strategic effort. He
Right.
wasn't just randomly practicing.
Right.
He targeted his weaknesses head on
Yeah.
and devised these really creative,
Yeah.
almost unorthodox methods to overcome them.
So it's this combination of like
Yeah.
persistence and ingenuity,
Mm-hmm.
fueled by a clear vision
Right.
of what he wanted to achieve.
Exactly.
That reminds me of
Yeah.
something else that comes up a lot in all of this, is especially in the obstacle is the way.
Okay.
And that's this idea of like
Mm.
embracing failure as part of the process.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, there's no better example of this than Thomas Edison
Okay.
and his quest to invent the light bulb.
Mm.
He famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work."
Ooh, that's a pretty good way to reframe failure.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's more than just like a positive spin.
Okay.
You know, it's a fundamental shift
Right.
in how we approach challenges.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing setbacks as defeats,
Mm-hmm.
we can start viewing them as data points,
Okay.
valuable pieces of information that
Yeah.
can guide us towards the right solution.
So each, like, quote, failure
Yeah.
is actually a step closer
Mm-hmm.
to success,
It can be.
as long as we're learning from it.
Precisely.
Okay.
And that learning
Yeah.
requires a willingness to experiment, to
Definitely.
try different approaches, even
Yeah.
if they seem, you know, risky or unconventional.
Right.
It's about embracing the iterative process,
Well,
knowing that each attempt,
yeah.
even the ones that don't work,
Right.
they bring us closer to our goal.
That really resonates with what the Stoics emphasized
Yeah.
about focusing on what we can control.
Yes.
Like, we can't always control the outcome,
Right.
but we can control our effort,
Mhm.
our attitude, our willingness
Exactly.
to learn from our mistakes.
It's like that old saying,
Yeah.
fall down 7 times, get up 8,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know?
That.
And this idea of focusing on what we can control
Mm-hmm.
is beautifully illustrated in the story of Samuel Zemurray,
Okay.
Banana Man,
Okay.
who built a fruit empire
Wow.
from scratch.
The book mentions he started with nothing.
Yeah, literally selling bruised bananas
Right.
off a dock in New Orleans.
Wow.
But he had this incredible tenacity, this unwavering belief in his ability to succeed.
Okay.
And when he faced obstacles,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't get discouraged.
Wow.
He found creative workarounds,
Okay.
often like leveraging his limited resources
Right.
to outmaneuver much larger competitors.
Yeah. There's that story about how he, like,
Oh, yeah.
took on the United Fruit Company.
Yeah, the giant of the industry at
Yeah.
the time.
And they refused to sell him bananas.
They did.
So he went around them,
Yeah.
acquired his own plantations in Honduras.
Yeah, talk about turning an obstacle upside down.
I mean, that's...
It's a masterclass
Yeah.
in resourcefulness.
Wow.
He didn't let their rejection
Yeah.
defeat him.
Right.
He used it as fuel
Wow.
to build an even stronger foundation for his business.
It's like, it's a reminder that sometimes
Yeah.
limitations can actually
Yeah.
spark incredible innovation.
They can.
You just need to be willing to, like,
Right.
think outside the box and challenge conventional wisdom.
Exactly.
So we're seeing this theme of action, you know, that's persistent,
Yeah.
ingenious, guided by a clear vision.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another element that feels crucial here,
Okay.
and that's adaptability.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to kind of adjust course, to pivot when necessary.
Uh-huh.
After all, you know,
Yeah.
the world is rarely predictable.
You're spot on.
Yeah.
And when it comes to adaptability,
Yeah.
there's no better example than Amelia Earhart.
Okay.
She was a pioneer in aviation,
Right.
pushing the boundaries of what was possible,
Right.
but she also understood the
Yeah.
importance of flexibility.
So during her attempt
Yeah.
to circumnavigate the globe,
Right.
she encountered, you know,
Yeah.
countless challenges, mechanical issues, bad weather,
Mm-hmm.
communication breakdowns, the whole 9 yards.
All of it.
But she didn't let those setbacks
Yeah.
define her journey.
She didn't, and instead of getting stuck, she adapted.
Right.
She changed her route,
Wow.
made repairs on the fly,
Right.
constantly recalibrated her plan
Wow.
based on the,
Yeah.
ever-changing conditions.
So it's not about having, like,
Right.
a perfect plan.
Yeah.
It's about having the resourcefulness and, like, the mental agility
Uh-huh.
to adapt when things inevitably...
Go awry.
Precisely.
I gotcha.
Amelia Earhart's story reminds us
Yeah.
that we don't always need to have all the answers.
Right.
We just need to be willing to,
Mm-hmm.
roll with the punches,
Yeah.
adjust our approach,
Right.
make the most of whatever resources are available to us.
Right.
You know, this ties back to what we were discussing earlier
Yeah.
about focusing on what we can control.
Right.
We might not be able to control the weather
Right.
or mechanical failures, but we can control how we respond to them.
I mean, it feels like all these examples are pointing to something
Yeah.
deeper than just,
Right.
specific actions.
Yeah.
It's about the spirit
Yeah.
in which we approach those actions.
It is.
It's that unshakable something
Yes.
that allows us to keep going,
Yeah.
even when the odds are stacked against us.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the,
Arguably the most crucial element in
Yeah.
turning obstacles upside down,
okay.
and that's cultivating
Mm-hmm.
an unwavering will.
Okay, so we're talking about
Yeah, it's the inner strength,
okay.
the unyielding determination
Right.
that allows us to persevere,
Right.
even when faced with
Yeah.
daunting challenges
Right.
and inevitable setbacks.
So it's about that
Yeah.
grit factor,
It is.
that mental toughness
Mm-hmm.
that allows us to stay the course
Yeah,
even when we feel like giving up.
even when we want to quit.
But how do we
Yeah.
cultivate that kind of unwavering will?
Yeah, it almost feels like some
Yeah.
people are just born with it.
Right, exactly.
Well, while some individuals
Yeah.
may have a natural predisposition towards resilience,
Yeah.
the will is ultimately
Right.
a muscle
Okay.
that can be strengthened
Okay.
through practice and conscious effort.
Okay. So it's not like
Yeah.
a fixed trait.
It's not. It's something that we can
Or
develop.
we can actually build it up.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about choosing
Mhm.
again and again
Yeah.
to align our actions
Right.
with our deepest values and
Mhm.
aspirations,
Yeah.
even when it's difficult.
Right. Even when it's hard.
And that's where we'll pick up next time.
Okay.
Exploring how we can
Yes.
tap into that inner reservoir of strength,
Mm.
that indomitable spirit
Yeah.
that allows us to not just overcome obstacles,
Right.
but to thrive in the face of them.
Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about perception, action,
Right.
adaptability, all these things.
Yeah.
But it really does feel like there's this underlying current
Yeah.
that powers it all.
Mhm.
This idea of the will,
The will, yeah.
this unshakable inner strength.
Yeah, that's the engine.
Yeah.
It's what fuels our actions, sustains us when things get tough.
Right.
It keeps us moving, even when logic and reason might kind of falter. It's
Yeah.
the difference between having a map and actually making the journey, you know?
So then the question becomes,
Yeah.
how do we actually cultivate this
Yeah.
unwavering will?
That's the big question.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
these examples are pretty awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
But also kind of intimidating.
They are, yeah.
Like Abraham Lincoln, right?
Mm-hmm.
Facing political opposition, military defeats,
Yeah.
even personal tragedy.
Right.
Yet he never gave up on his vision.
Lincoln's story is a really powerful reminder
Yeah.
that the will isn't about being immune to
Right.
hardship. It's about what we choose to focus on
Okay.
amidst the storm.
Yeah.
He had every reason
Yeah, exactly.
to despair,
Right.
yet he kept his sights set on the greater good,
Yeah.
on the possibility of, a unified nation.
It's almost like
Yeah.
the obstacles themselves became fuel
They did.
for his determination. That resonates with this idea from the book.
Yeah, okay.
The obstacle in the path becomes the path.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
Not going around it, but through it.
Exactly. And adversity can forge strength.
Yeah.
The things that we might perceive as impediments, they can become catalysts for growth.
Yeah.
And we see this over and over again, not just with these historical figures,
Right.
but in everyday life.
Yeah.
The single parent
Yeah.
juggling work and childcare,
Right.
the entrepreneur facing rejection after
It's
rejection.
about finding that
Yeah.
wellspring of determination
It's
within.
inner strength. Yeah.
Well, speaking of resilience,
Mm-hmm.
there's another example
Okay.
that's just incredible.
Okay.
James Stockdale,
Yeah, James Stockdale.
the Navy pilot
Yeah.
who endured years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam.
I mean, Stockdale's experience is a testament to the power of hope.
Wow.
Even in the darkest of circumstances, he was subjected to, unimaginable suffering,
Right.
yet he never gave in
Yeah.
to despair.
He clung to this belief
Yeah.
that he would eventually be free.
Yeah.
And that's what sustained him.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't blind optimism.
Right. He talked about
Yeah.
the importance of accepting reality,
Hmm.
not clinging to, false hopes or denying the situation.
So it's this balance, right?
Yeah.
Acknowledging the brutal facts
Yeah.
while still holding on to the belief that
Right.
you can endure,
Yeah.
even overcome.
It's a delicate dance, isn't it?
It is.
Realism without resignation,
Yeah.
hope without naivete.
Okay.
And that's where the Stoics offer
Hmm.
this really powerful practice.
Okay.
They called it premeditation of evils.
Okay, that sounds,
I know, it sounds a little intense.
yeah, a little intense.
But it's actually about preparation,
Okay,
not pessimism.
gotcha.
So imagine, like, a project you're working on. What are some things that could go wrong?
Wow.
How would you handle those setbacks?
Yeah.
By mentally rehearsing these scenarios,
Okay.
we diminish their power
Yeah.
to derail us when they actually happen.
So it's like a mental fire drill
Exactly.
for challenges.
Yeah.
You know, you're anticipating, strategizing,
Mhm.
building up that mental
There's
immunity
resilience.
to discouragement.
And it ties back to,
Mhm.
what we were discussing earlier
Yeah.
about focusing on what we can control.
Right.
We can't always control the external events,
Right.
but we can control our preparation, our responses.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how
Yeah.
all these pieces fit together.
Yeah.
You know, perception, action,
Uh-huh.
this idea of premeditation.
Yeah.
It's like a,
It is. It's like a feedback loop.
yeah, exactly.
Each element
Mhm.
strengthening the others.
Yeah.
Our perceptions shape our actions strengthen our will,
Right.
and a strong will allows us to,
Face challenges with more clarity and resolve.
This has been a seriously eye-opening
Yes.
deep dive.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like we've gone from, feeling overwhelmed by obstacles to
Yeah.
seeing them as almost opportunities to train our minds, to test our resolve, to ultimately become like stronger versions of ourselves.
And that's the beauty of it, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's not about, seeking out hardship.
Right.
It's about recognizing that adversity
Yeah.
is an inherent part of life.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And within those challenges
Yeah.
lies the potential for incredible growth,
Wow.
for forging an unyielding spirit that can weather any storm.
So if we can master our perceptions,
Yeah,
take decisive action, and cultivate that unwavering will,
you got it.
we're not just surviving obstacles,
Yeah.
we're using them as fuel
We
to
are.
become more resilient,
Yeah.
more capable, more
Yeah.
ourselves.
Right.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination.
I like that.
And the most important thing is to simply begin
Yeah.
one step at a time, one challenge at a time.
Right.
Knowing that within you lies the strength to not just overcome,
Yeah.
but to thrive.
Well, thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.